morning, everyone. Next person that cheers me getting hit in the head with 2x4 is officially kicked out of the church. I'd like to welcome you to Epiphany Station yet again. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matty Taus. I get to be the lead pastor here. And if you are our guest, you are checking Epiphany out, or maybe you've been gone for a while, there's a few things I want to let you know that might help you relax, might help you connect with this church family. The first is, if you're concerned or worried about a gilded golden plate coming down your row, shaking you down for coin, don't worry about that today. Instead, at Epiphany, what we like to do is we like to promote self-motivated giving. So if anyone does feel inclined towards to give towards the mission and vision of Epiphany, there's 3 ways to do it. We have 2 red boxes at the back of the room. We have a card reader on a tablet, and you can always give online at epiphanystation.com. The second thing I want to let you know about is that you'll see towards the sound booth these golden cards and a couple of stands there. This really is your ability to communicate with Epiphany Station. If there's something that you just want to let us know or you want to be known, you can fill this out, drop it in one of the red boxes, and we'll get in touch with you. If you are our first-time guest, we would love you to take this to the welcome station so they can put a face to a name, and there's also a free gift waiting for you there. Now, the final thing I want you to know is that you have walked into the 3rd week of our teaching series called Tough Love. And yes, I did get hit in the head, and it really hurt. But the reason that we shot that video and the reason we're doing this series is over the summer, we're going to take a slow walk through a very fast-paced book of the Bible, a letter that was written by a guy called James, which really had the intent of calling out the church and how that we can actually love God and love people with every single area of our lives, not just living out some religion or tradition, but instead actually getting to grips with what it means to put everything on the line for our God. So that's what we're doing, and we're in week 3, and today we're talking about wisdom. Now, wisdom, as it's defined by the dictionary, or dictionary.com, because who knows actually what a dictionary is anymore, is that wisdom is the state of knowing what is right and wrong, and the ability then to put that into practice, or put that into action. And for us today, James continues in the very beginning of his letter by saying this to the church: if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. There's this implication that, first of all, we need wisdom, but the second implication is much more fun, that we have to even be told that we can ask for it. Now, there's a couple of mindsets that people could have that made James want to put that in there, to need to write that. I can only think of a couple, and that's just because my mind rabbit trails a lot, but the first is that people considered actually living a moronic lifestyle was better than asking God for wisdom. That's one option. The other is that James was just kind of being patronizing. I can't put it any other way. It's like, hey, do you know you can actually ask your God for wisdom? Now, it's kind of actually a thing that he's excited about. It's the equivalent of parents saying to the kids, hey, while we're out, we wouldn't freak out if you did the dishes. We wouldn't be upset if you mowed the lawn. In fact, we actually want that to happen too, because God seems to be interested in us knowing how to live wisely. It's why James is not the first place you hear this. In fact, the whole book, all of the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, Old and New sections are riddled with this mentality that God desires people who love him to live wisely and therefore to be able to love people well. James places one qualifier on this asking for wisdom, and it's this. He says, if you need wisdom. Now, I'm not going to ask you to answer that right now. You're all incredibly wise people, but that's the problem that we have when it comes to wisdom. Is usually we can consider other people need wisdom. Don't look to your left or to your right, or your pastor for that matter. But instead, we very little think of ourselves on what we could consider a lack of wisdom. We might even be able to bring ourselves to the point of saying, sure, I used to be unwise. 10 years ago, I didn't have much wisdom, but I'm pretty set as I am. And the problem with that is, a lot of us, when it comes to wisdom, live in kind of retroactive wisdom, in that we learn stuff, but we tend to learn it a little bit late in the game. We learn it the hard way, and then we can say to the next generations, hey, we missed out, but hey, let me tell you how it's supposed to be, and then they can ignore that, and then they can go on to do their own hard learning, and it goes on. And we miss out on the essence of what wisdom really is, the ability to apply what is right in the moment. And we miss out on that so many times, it seems ridiculous that James would imply we don't have to. James's statement, I guess you could even call it his proposal, is that we could have wisdom now. We could have it actually when we need it, before we need it, in the moment, and it's there for the asking. So let me ask you this. Where would you rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 10 in wisdom? What number would you give yourself? 6. That's generous. She's the one that laughed at the... Anyway. Now, for some of us, we consider, like, I would never answer that question. I'm far too humble to rank my wisdom. But I know for a fact that you've all done it in your head. Even if you said you wouldn't, you've now got a number in your head. It's somewhere hovering around the middle for the humble. But what happens is when we rate ourselves or rank our wisdom, what we at least should be able to assess is that maybe we're not as wise as we would like to be. Maybe we didn't give ourselves a 10. Maybe we would actually like to consider that one day we would be a little bit wiser than we are now. And what James is saying is that's possible. Is that you can know how to live in a wiser way. You can know how to live better. You can know how to parent better. You can know how to work better. You can know how to use relationships and understand sex and understand money and how to do church better if we can gain access to what God is calling, what James is calling, wisdom. We have to be willing, though, to appreciate that maybe we don't know it all right away. That maybe, in fact, everything you're currently doing is with less wisdom than you could have. And James is going to go on to say that you are not as wise as you want to be, probably because you choose not to be. Now, this is James's love of the church, to call them out, but in tough love to declare the truth of the matter. And the truth is, we needn't be without wisdom. We needn't see it in retrospect and hindsight. Instead, we don't need to deal in the, well, if I'd known then. We can say, I know now, I have wisdom now. Now, I know what you're thinking to yourself. This sounds all too good to be true. Why wouldn't we have done this before now? Did it take some Englishman with smooth words to be able to come and pitch this sale? Well, here's your buy one, get one free offer. It's too good to be true. The problem when it comes to wisdom and the conversation about it is, then why haven't we done it? Why haven't we done it? In fact, if you want to be pointed, hey, Maddie, why haven't you done it? Why aren't we all the most wise individuals in the entire world? And that is because with biblical godly wisdom, there's a catch. And the catch to wisdom is you have to be willing to give something up, and it is something you do not want to give up. It is something you have to be willing to lay on the line as a cost for access to godly wisdom. A little later on in his letter, James goes on to talk about what this really looks like in practical application and why we must give something up. He says, if you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you are bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. For jealousy and selfishness are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. James takes wisdom and selfishness and says you can't have both. These two don't coexist. These two don't play nice. They're not going to be able to be both part of your life. And selfishness, in essence, is me first. Selfishness is my wants, my needs, my goals, my passions, my desires before anything or anyone else. And I don't know how many times we're going to do this, but every time that we seem to have a conversation about loving God and loving people, it seems to circle back around to this one question. Who's the center of your universe? Because if it's you, we've got a problem. If it's me, I've got a problem. If I want to be wise, I want to love God, I want to love people, but I am the most important thing to me, I'm going to have an issue. Specifically when it comes to wisdom, James says, look, selfishness and humility do not come together. Therefore, wisdom is not possible for those who wish to put themselves first. He goes on to say why that is and why wisdom is so very different. He says, continuing on in verse 17, but the wisdom from above is first of all pure. It is also peace-loving. It is gentle at all times. It is willing to yield to others. It is full of mercy. It is the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism, and it is always sincere. Does that sound familiar to anything else that we would describe as something God gives and his ability to do? Because to me, it sounds a lot like love. To me, absolute pure wisdom sounds like love. And it sounds not like the ooey gooey mushy kind of love. It sounds like sacrificial love. It sounds like the pinnacle expression of love, which is humility. It is to say I am not first. It is to say others are second. So if we take our definition that wisdom is to know what right action is and then to put it into practice, it would appear that true biblical wisdom is to know that yes, life begins with me, but it does not end with me. Yes, I need to start with me, but my whole life cannot be aimed at me. Yes, I need to comprehend and understand my needs, but I cannot be preoccupied with them. That's biblical wisdom. That's godly wisdom from above. That's what God puts on offer for those who want to do what he's called them to do. Those who want to love God, those who want to love people, those who want to be called his kids. That's the offer. That's the problem. That's the rub. Because if it's so freely on offer to us, then why then do we not? Why then do we not take him up on this offer? Why then do we not ask? Why then is it that we feel like we have less wisdom than we need? Why is it that the world feels like it's draining out from the bottom when it comes to wisdom? Why is wisdom the exception more than the rule? Why instead of wanting to know what is right, we're just more interested in being right and therefore fighting our corner tooth and nail to prove it? Could it be that we don't actually want wisdom? Could it be that we don't want God's type of wisdom? Could it be that we actually think that would cost us a little bit too much? That might be a little bit too little of me? Because in where we live, in our culture, and this is no different, times have not changed, it's all about me. It's all about me, and it's all about loyalty to myself and my needs. It's all about looking out for what's best for me and no one else and nothing else. And when we live like that, biblical wisdom looks foolish. Godly wisdom looks stupid. Because why would you ever consider yielding to others going first, you lifting them up in your place? That doesn't fit, that doesn't gel with my mentality that I am the center of my universe. James calls wisdom fruit, something that actually yields from the root in which we're attached to, that comes from what we have connected ourselves toward. I don't think that we lack wisdom because we're incapable of holding on to it. I don't think we lack wisdom because God doesn't want to give it. I think we lack wisdom because we don't know where our roots are. We don't know what our priority is. We don't know what we love most. So therefore, we forget what we're here to do. We forget what we're grafted into. You see, if we were all about loving God, if we were all about loving people, then that would yield the fruit of godly wisdom. At our fingertips would be oozing the wisdom that we need to be able to live that out. And the tough thing about that is if that's true and we're not seeing it, then we have to ask ourselves a really tough question. What do I love more? Where have I been going elsewhere for wisdom? What other vine have I grafted myself into? Or am I attached to nothing at all? Am I simply wandering, hoping one day I'll get wise? See, when it comes to us wanting wisdom, to you wanting wisdom, I think it's got a lot more to do with what you're loyal to. And if it's godly wisdom that you want, then loyalty to God is what we'll need. If we go back to where James started us out in chapter 1, verse 5, he said, if you need wisdom, ask your generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking, but here's the rest of that chunk. But when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver. For a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do. It would appear that godly wisdom is dependent on loyalty to God. It is the singularity of focus that God is most important and therefore what we will drive ourselves towards. And God's been dealing with people like you and me for a few millennia now. We're not different. He knows our type. We waver. There are too many other things that seem good, like we could be attracted to them, like that might be the source of wisdom, so we waver. Even though he says don't waver, we waver. And to waver means to flicker. It means to quiver. It means to wobble. And I remember as a young kid, either having read to me or reading an ancient proverb that stuck with me that went something like this. It said, if you seek to walk, then walk. To sit, then sit. Above all else, do not wobble. And I believe it was maybe my mom sharing it with me when I was supposed to be sitting still for something, but nonetheless, it holds true that we struggle with this characteristic of loyalty, of focus, of being driven by one thing alone. We sacrifice that all too often on the altar of, ooh, shiny thing. Shiny thing that sounds new and interesting and fantastic, and I'm going to follow that instead. I'm going to change the way I live based on shininess. And because of that, we lack wisdom and we waver, and James pegs us right between the eyes and says, this is going to happen. Don't let it happen. You have the option to increase your loyalty towards your God and therefore to find sure footing, that you could walk behind him with less wobble. If not, if we were never to pursue that, then life looks simple. It simply looks like, as he put it, forever to be unsettled, unstable in everything we do. Now, speaking about being unsettled and instability, let's talk about my marriage for a while. About 10 years ago, before Jackie and I were married, we were young, we were good looking, we were happy, and we were a little bit blurry because apparently all pictures from 10 years ago look a little bit like this. They were taken on flip phones, kids. Flip phones. Nope? Okay. Before we were about to be engaged, and we do engagement in England the same way that you do engagement. First you go to the in-laws and ask for a hand in marriage, then you go to the Queen and ask if it's okay to get married, and she says yes, and you move on. So we did all that, Queen said yes, it's a joke. I didn't want to think of moving away with that one. That would make you look foolish. We were planning to be married. I was planning my proposal to her, and what I thought is I'm super romantic, so I'll get romantic with this. So I took her for a walk on a beautiful beach in a town of Barmouth. That was where I'm from before I moved here. That's real. That's where I was. You know where I live now. Yes, correct. So I thought, lovely stroll on the beach. Now, in hindsight, or I guess in retrospect, apparently it was a bit breezy. Jackie says there was 70 to 80 mile an hour gusts, but take what you want. There's no one else on the beach, which was nice. But my plan is we could walk along this stone pier that kind of juts out in an L shape. And wind doesn't bother the English because it's always windy. It's why we're short and stocky and we're always low to the ground, waiting to be blown off our feet. But Jackie's American, so her head's in the clouds and she's always daydreaming about things. Now, about freedom and stuff. Anyway. We don't know that. So we round the corner, and the wind is coming off the ocean. So we round that corner, and it starts battering us to the side, and I couldn't help but remember, wow, Jackie's been really affectionate, kind of tucking herself in under my arm. She remembers being a desperate reason for doing that. But we got about halfway along the continuation of that pier there, and I'm like, okay, we should probably head back. And she's like, maybe. And my idea was, well, what we could do is we could jump down on the town side of the pier, because it's the kind of the lee side to the wind, and then we could walk back and she'd be more protected. Beautiful plan, by the way. Anyway, so what we see is I come to the edge of the pier, and I look down, and it was maybe, I said 2, she says 8 feet, and there's just some sand down there. She said there was rocks. And what happened is I went first and just, like a mountain goat, just pranced down. I thought, she's going to be impressed with that. And while I'm thinking she's going to be impressed with that, I hear, Maddie! And I turn around to what can only be described as the cartoon version of someone windmilling, trying to stay up on the edge. And that's the last thing I saw. I then woke up, laying out on the sand, with my beautiful, elegant, graceful bride-to-be gushing blood from her chin, and me with blood coming out of my forehead. Apparently, we'd gotten really intimate, really fast, really hard, down by the beach. I proposed the next day. Now, I tell that story for 2 reasons. 1, it's hilarious. And 2, it's the very image that came to my mind in talking about being buffeted about by the wind, as James calls it. of having no sure footing, of having no grounded, but instead being tossed back and forth like a wave in the sea, having no point of reference. See, that day, Jackie had no control. She had no clue where she was going to end up. She just knew she was going somewhere, didn't know what it was going to be like when she got there, and it ended in pain. And the reason that I thought about that was, how much is that telling of how we go through life? Lacking wisdom. Lacking the ability to say where we're going and why we're going there, having loyalty to one thing alone. So very much instead, traveling forward at a speed we don't control, ending in pain, over and over and over again. The challenge to us when it comes to wisdom is, how can we expect to have wisdom when we don't even know what we believe? On the day of dads, how can we expect to parent when we don't know what we're loyal to? How can we expect to make decisions for the future? How can we expect to receive anything from God when we ourselves don't even know how we would use that blessing for His glory or for our own? See, foolishness characterized is not thinking it through. It's going ahead. It's not having foresight. It's showing very little sense in your actions. And to circumnavigate that, loyalty has to come first. It's not wisdom first, it's loyalty. It's loyalty to what you know, you stand for, what you believe in. And you every day get to choose that. I every day get to choose what I'm most loyal to. And if it's God, He then stands ready with an open hand saying, here's wisdom to do that. Here's the wisdom to be able to live that out, to love me, to love the people around you and in your life, because that's what I want too. If you're going to do that, He stands ready. And it is for us to then ask for it, knowing who we are and what we're rooted into. Now, every week so far this series, we've kind of had our next step be an open-ended statement that's waiting for you to fill it in on a regular basis. Week 1, we talked about who we belong to, so I sent you home with this challenge to put in a prominent place, I belong to, and then leave the blank, so on a daily basis you can ask that question. Last week we talked about what we're fighting for, what we're here for, what we're going to bat for. So I challenge you to write somewhere you'd see it, I am fighting for, and leave it blank. So today, grab your programs, grab your pens. If you're at home, grab some Roundup and go to the lawn, because you're going to want to remember this one. Today I am asking God for. Today I am asking God for. I'm going to give you a couple of options to get you started. You might need to ask for loyalty first. It might be that you don't really understand what having a relationship with your God looks like. Maybe you have never had one. Maybe at this point you still don't even want one. But maybe you're also tired of being buffeted around by circumstance and situation. Maybe you're tired of not knowing where you're going or what you're rooted into. God offers to give you a desire for loyalty to Him, because He wants nothing more than that singular relationship with you. So maybe you need to first ask God for loyalty, or maybe your loyalty's been wavering. Maybe you struggle to stay committed to the God that loves you. Who knows? Maybe you need to ask for straight up wisdom. Maybe you do kind of want to love God, you kind of want to love people, but you flat out don't know how to put that into action. Maybe you struggle with temptations to an old way of doing things, or things that are contrary to what God has called us to be and to do. So ask Him for wisdom. Be willing to finally come to Him and say, this portion of my life is riddled with foolishness. I don't want it to be. I want it to be wise. Maybe you need to ask for humility. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road. And maybe you do love God, and maybe you do love people, and maybe you're incredibly wise, but for some reason people just don't want to listen to you. Maybe people don't think that you're wise. Maybe people can't hear your wisdom. Maybe people don't want you to lead them in anything or show them anything, because maybe you lack the wisdom of humility. Maybe you lack the ability to put your care of them ahead of your desire to lead or to tell them what's wise. So maybe you need to ask God to help you be humble, to seek to serve them, to seek to add value to them. Maybe you've got some apologizing to do. Maybe you've got some caring to do. But in all of these ways, God stands ready to make of you what He has crafted you to be. An exceptional lover of God, of people. Someone who is singularly focused to the most productive form of life you can have with your years on earth. So we've all got something to pray for, no matter what you feel now inclined towards or called to pray for or to ask for. Whatever you're now desperately feeling needs to change in your life, God stands there generously waiting. Patiently waiting with people like me that have done dumb things. Giving hope to the wanderer and to the captive. To people that could truly be brought into his family and be given the wisdom to live the rest of their years out in the way that will love him and love people. This week I challenge you to ask yourself that question. What am I asking God for? What do I need? This week I'm going to be praying for you. And I'd love to pray for you right now if you want to join me in doing so. Father God, help us first to have the sense of reality, the honest humility to know that we are not fully wise and that we have need and we don't know. Help us to come to you with that expression of submission, that we need what you have, and that we do truly desire to want it. We do desire to be wise. We don't want to be foolish, but help us to take the steps to get there. Help us to have loyalty. Help us to put distractions aside. Help us to move away from the shiny, but instead go to what is solid and what is good. God, we ask you to make of us people who truly can love you, an expression of wisdom, and love people with humility. We want to be your people. In Jesus' name, amen.